This is the 21st season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. Usually a couple times a year, we're either on the water or in the studio with the man, the myth, the legend, Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank. Thanks for coming to my neck of the woods. And what would you consider this? East Central Oklahoma, or just Central? It's Central Oklahoma. It's just east of Oklahoma City.
Yeah. We're a little bit east of Central, but mid-east Central. Yeah, we can say that.
Mid-east Central. We got a good show today. So if you know Scott, the last time we were on the water, we were dialing in my 0 degree.
Yes, sir. And
my new Garmin 16 and my single transducer, and we had Austin Cranford out on the water. That if you are looking for general settings and just kind of how to dial something in, that was a really cool on the water episode. We have more on the water stuff coming later this year, potentially with a number of top tier Elite Series anglers.
We'll see what happens. You know, rumors are flying. The rumor mill's going.
Who's all on the team for the Elite Series this year? You somehow managed to finagle classic champ Justin Hamner. I know you sent the hat out. I think I found the only person that's worse about sending giveaways, or as equally bad about sending giveaways. See, I've got some All Might over there that goes to the Mountain Duo. By the way, that's going to drop this week. I was a guest host on the Mountain Duo show.
Nice.
Where they literally don't open this. This is the last one. They literally review every.
Okay, so for me to
no, every flavor of Mountain Dew. It was an hour. We did an hour-long show with the two of them. No, about the Baja Cabo Citrus Mountain Dew exclusively.
All right.
They had a list of criteria that we judged on all this stuff. I took it very seriously.
Well, you should.
I did.
Fantastic.
I see there's a lot of Mountain Dew being slung around in the outdoor space now. I don't know if you've noticed that or not.
Oh yeah.
Just full disclosure, I'm doing this for free. They haven't. Mountain Dew has not contacted me. This is not a plug. Like I was watching some of the Guggen stuff and John P. I'm like, damn, everyone's drinking Mountain Dew these days.
Well, they might contact you. You know, you've got a very wide reach, Matt.
I forgot. Yeah, make sure you talk into it.
Yeah. You got me there.
There you go. Okay. You're good. We're going to get into a number of topics today. This is more of a concept show. This isn't hit this button to make this happen and angle this to see this, because real quick before we get into it, Scott, give a little bit of your background and history on how you ended up where you are right now with the Bass Tank. I know everybody knows who you are and what you do, but just a brief history of kind of your background, when it all kind of exploded, and how you ended up here.
Well, I come from an engineering background, and I've always been around technology just in my pre-Bass Tank life, but I've also been an outdoorsman, hunting, fishing, everything. I've never trusted other people to touch my stuff. And so I always rigged my own boats, and my small circle of friends would always bring me their boats as well. Way back in the ancient days when a 9-inch graph seemed like it was big, my buddies would still bring me their stuff, where I would be in numerous garages helping them with their stuff. So it was almost like predestined to head this way. And then long story short, through a series of events, we had a situation where we had a boat with a tournament coming up, and quite frankly, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, I'll name no names, but they did a horrible job. And the idea was born out of that this is a problem industry wide, and there's a real need for someone to step in and be able to rig these boats as the technology was advancing and understand it, because it wasn't just a wire and a wire anymore. There's real power considerations. There's real networking. I mean, these things.
The way I understand it would basically be like putting a 50 horse on a 20-foot glass boat and then saying, well, why isn't this thing going 70?
Correct.
That's most layman's term.
That is the most Matt terms possible,
Yeah.
but it works. But you're not wrong. And wouldn't you know it, that when you try to do things the right way and people have a good experience and you treat customers, customer service was, I said, I don't want to do this if we don't have good customer service. Like, I don't want good customer service. I want great customer service. I want the type that revolutionizes the industry. I know that's a cliche term, but that's what I wanted, back to where a handshake matters, my word matters. And, figured it and keyed it up as want to be the guys that you want to shoot the bull with, that you want to talk to, you'd want to sit there and have a beer in your garage with, those type. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it. Obviously there's more competition than there's ever been, but I still believe if you do things the right way and treat people correctly, that you'll be successful. And the support we've had, I think, proves that.
All right. So that was well done. So
I kept it short just for you.
No,
I know.
I do. So I'm sharing the screen right now over here. You can't see it, of thebasstank.com.
Yep.
There's the screen. So there's a little bit of background, and I know this is rehashing a little bit. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. So full time, you run a electronics and installation company in the tournament fishing space. You do a lot of, sometimes I go in the shop and you got a muskie guy in there, a walleye guy, a crappie guy from all over, but majority, I would say, I don't know, I'm asking, I guess, tournament bass anglers who are looking to, like, what percentage would you say are tournament bass anglers from club level all the way up through Bassmaster Classic Champion Elite Series anglers looking to get their stuff dialed in? If
you include the club level guys, they're hey, these are serious fishermen. They're weekend anglers. They go fish a club tournament as well, all the way up to, like you said, the Elite Series guy. That does. I would say that's probably 50 to 60%.
Okay. Stay with us, folks. This is not a Bass Tank promo video. I'm going somewhere with this, but you guys set the scene.
We can make this a promo video. Like and subscribe below. No, the rest of them are kind of a mixed bag of maybe ex-tournament fishermen that, interestingly enough, like got out of it for one reason or another. Life happened. Maybe they didn't like the direction a certain club was going or a certain trail was going. I hear that more. It's interesting because I hear that more and more. Like, I used to fish tournaments. I don't anymore, but I want to get back into fishing, and I love this new technology.
Yep.
I'm like, okay.
Like a Frank Scalish type deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you get a lot of those guys. Then you get a lot of the, man, I just like these new gizmos and gadgets. I've had my boat since 2005, and I haven't upgraded my electronics, and look at all these things here. And like it or hate it, technology is here. And I'm not even getting into the forward facing stuff. I'm just talking about the new technology. Like, it's insane. Like, I was looking the other day, I've got an old HDS Gen 1 Lowrance sitting in my shop, and I was looking at them like, I should sell this. I'm like, who's going to buy this?
I've tried to explain that to Jeffries when he used to get the Lowrance units and was trying to sell them. I'm like, Jeffries, you're 4 generations old. You're not going to get $1,000 for this thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I could probably find someone that wants it, but I'm better off just giving it to them, because who's going to pay for this? And rightfully so, because it's like a computer. I replaced my laptop a couple years ago, and I was looking, I'm like, man, this thing just was brand new. Then I realized, wait a minute, it's 2 years old, and in a laptop that's getting middle-aged. Technology just moves so fast that you can go broke trying to stay up with it. But also you can think that you just bought it, and you turn around and say, well, that was 6 years ago. Man, you're several generations behind. And that's where we kind of come in to try to bridge that gap to help people stay up with it that want to, but also provide the service of, hey, this is just my base entry level as well.
When it first came out, let's do just a 12-inch screen with the top end at the time. Do you remember off the top of your head if you wanted to just have, which was massive, a 12-inch screen and a 32 in the Garmin, or the equivalent of that in Active Target? Yeah. What was it off the showroom floor when it very first came out? Like,
now, are you saying the top of the line, or you're saying the most consistently purchased?
I want the top of the line.
So you were talking about,
or to get into it, like something that a guy would come and say,
yeah.
I want to fish
Yep.
the Toyotas.
So-
I want to fish the Opens and have.
So a guy that was going to come in and that was doing that, fishing in the Toyotas or the Opens, was going to come in with a 12-inch screen. The question was, at that time, it was a 7000 series Garmin.
Okay. And this is what, 2000?
So Live Scope, the LVS 32 was
19,
released in
18.
It really didn't start moving until 2019. I mean, we were still backordered in 2019.
Okay.
Like,
So
it was still
what
hard to
did
get.
that cost to get into it in
So
2019?
the 32, and mind you, at that time, Active Target didn't exist. Like Garmin had a couple years to be by themselves.
Yep.
Even, in terms some people may have never heard is Live Sight. That was the original Lowrance version, and it was more accustomed to the old Panoptics. It was short lived, and then Active Target came out. I think it was 2 years after that. But anyway, the LVS 32 was $1,500. A 1222, which is your baseline 12-inch screen, I want to say it was $1,800, 18 or 1900 at that time.
So when it came out, it was about 3,500.
About 3,500 to get into.
And what is it now? Like,
so
if
that
someone wanted something equivalent in 2025.
So the same thing now. We can't. The 32 is no longer available. It's the 34.
Yeah,
that's $1,700. That same 1222 is right at $2,000. So we've gone up about $500. Now, part of that is because the LVS 34 is more expensive than the 32. And then the 1222 has had one price increase. I want to say it was $1,900 back in the day, and then it's just gone up $100. But again, that's a base level 12-inch unit.
Yeah.
Now, with that, we've got a bundle right now that we can get you into a 12-inch Garmin and LVS 34 for $3,300.
Okay.
So it's crazy. Some prices have gone up.
Yeah, well, that was my question. Was the biggest thing off the hopper to me, and we're going to talk about a number of different things, all technology related, not good or bad, but information from someone that does this for a living, is I wasn't sure, had it gone up, had it gone down, was it normalized? So it basically seems
it's a slight trend. COVID unfortunately forced the hand, and I hate using this word, but there it is, COVID. The supply chain was a nightmare.
I feel like the more you say that word, the less will get shared on.
Okay. I won't say that.
I don't know. That could be a conspiracy.
It might be. I did not say that word. During certain time periods, not too long ago, the supply chain was in a rough shape. Yeah. And supply and demand.
2021.
20 to 21 and even into 22 because it's always a delayed reaction. And so supply and demand, Econ 101, if supply is low and demand is high, cost goes up because parts are harder to get, and parts are just harder to get. We didn't see a crazy spike. There's been every once in a while get a manufacturer, just from one of my vendors that says, hey, we fought this as long as we can. We've got to finally raise our prices. Okay. And we're going to do a 10% increase. And it stinks because, I always feel terrible because I have no control over that. When a manufacturer tells me, hey, I'm raising my prices. Yeah. Don't talk about it. You can't mention it until this date. And then in good faith, I've got to sit there and continue selling up to that date at this low price.
You can't be like, hey, buy it tomorrow or else you're.
Hey, I don't do pressure sales. But the guy that then comes in is like, man, we've been talking about this for a month and now the price has gone up $100. Man, are that old price? Man, I can't. I don't have that. I'm gonna. Mm-hmm. It's a tough spot, and what do? You want to be transparent, you want to be honest, but you still have to abide by certain rules.
I was just curious about it. You mentioned the supply and demand and the peak, which the Bass Tank, a lot of the installations, because you had a lot of people like me who some would argue that I know how to fish or don't know how to fish, but you had a lot of guys who knew that they needed it right, and that they didn't have the skill set to do that. What can you look back now in halfway through 2025 and say, this was the day that everyone decided we have to have it? This was the moment. This was the tournament. What was the start where you went, oh my God, this is out of control?
There's 3 events specifically that I can point to, and this started in the crappie crappie world. Yeah, the crappie fishermen were the first ones to.
Yeah, and I've had Zeke in. That's a great show we did with Zeke. He came in and talked about. He's like, I sit back and watch, a little bit of the bass from the outside, and I'm like, dude, we went through all this 4 years before you guys.
And that he's not wrong, and Zeke would be one to tell you the exact same thing, that it was the Wally Marshall Crappie Expo in Hot Springs, Arkansas. and
that started it for everything, in your opinion.
It was the crappie fishermen in that all had it.
Yeah.
But the average consumer, like I gave a seminar, and guys, like the first question I asked was, who's heard of live scope? And it was just a room full of people looking at me with that glazed look.
What year is this?
It would have been the fall of 19, I believe.
Okay. And this is just generally when it exploded. I'm not by any means saying that the bass tanker, you guys invented live scope or brought it to the masses. Right. I'm just saying.
No, this was when
a little bit of a timeline.
Exactly.
I feel like everybody gets so worked up over it. And sometimes it's nice to just kind of step back and just to look at the history of this thing and how it spreads out. And it kind of gives you maybe a little bit picture of where we'll get to in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. And basically that show, because we went there not expecting to participate in the tournament. Mm-hmm. Well, due to basically, I think a team dropped out or something, there was an opening, and because we were sponsored, we were able to basically, hey, if you want to put a team in, you're able to put a team in. And so it went from me expecting to have full help in the booth to me having to basically work the booth by myself. That was really fun. And then I was next to the concession stand, and the poor lady there, like, it would open at 8 o'clock. I would come in at 7:30 with my coffee, and I have people standing there. I'm like, how did you get in? My coffee would get cold because I'd never get to finish it. The lady at the concession stand would watch me get overworked all day long, like just get ran around. Finally, she'd come over and say, I feel bad to have a pretzel because you haven't stopped. So that's really when the crappie guys really, really, as a consumer. And again, this is a bubble, but I feel like it was around that time when.
But that was just, there were enough guides, enough pros that understood it, that then guys started getting in the boats and their buddies and they're calling and saying it. And then,
well, and I think the Wally Marshall, that was their first one that had a big draw.
Okay.
And so you had a lot of people in a central location. And so those people got it. And then word of mouth spreads like wildfire. Yeah. And then it was just,
and that would be about late, or 2018,
2019.
2018 is when I got on the water with it for the first time, and I remember having conversations. I know.
Yep.
There's a lot of water under the bridge here, but I remember I had conversations with John, and John was like, "Dude, this is cool. What we can do with crappie. I've got buddies who are guiding. You need to come out and see it." And we would sit there and be like, "I wonder." Like it would be amazing if you could do this for bass, but at the time you're ranged out 30 feet, you're dropping straight. And like, I remember having one specific conversation where like, I wonder if you could go to the Great Lakes and take that 15-foot rod and drop it on the smallmouth. But I'm looking back on that so much later now and how we fish now with forward facing. And I'm like, why did those pieces not connect to where you were just like, oh, we can just like cast to them.
Yeah.
And things like that. So that was that 18, 19 time frame. And then I went in and I got it done in the fall of 19. And I remember being at the Toyota Championship where I finished third.
Yeah.
Got a $20,000 check, caught 80% of my fish cranking a rock crawler.
Yeah.
And the other 20, I'd go out and I'd be like, look, you can like drop it and see it falling. And I caught a fish each of the 3 days. And I remember there that I only saw like 3 or 4 other boats that had that 32 transducer on it. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And you look at it and, cause I think forward to kind of getting to my point of when the bass guys caught it. And it was a love-hate relationship for me. It was good for us as a business. Obviously I want people to buy products. Like I want to be around and be in business, but as a fisherman, I was enjoying doing things that nobody else was doing, having access to fish that nobody else had access to. And I remember the first bass push to it, I believe it was an MLF event up on Champlain. And those guys were out there smoking the smallmouth with it. And the week after that, and I can't even remember the year, it was probably the spring, early summer, early summer, that would have been north, right? Mm-hmm. It was the one where they were it was really, really windy. It looked like the rodeo. I mean, they were up there all in their butt seats. Like that's how rough it was. The week or two after that, we started getting the calls from the bass fishermen like, hey, I saw this thing and I'm kind of interested.
June of 19, the pro circuit on Lake Champlain.
That could be it.
No, that's the one that Casey Scanlon won. I don't think.
No, that wasn't it. Because it was after the Wally Marshall. It would have been the one I'm pretty sure it was 20.
Okay.
But it was still smallmouth. that was the interesting part. It was the smallmouth that they're like, hey, we could do this for a smallmouth because the way they school up, the way they, position themselves, we can see it. You still can't target largemouth. And then Patrick Walters, Lake Fork in the fall on a jerkbait, Century Belt. That was the day the bass changed. I got to give him a shout out when they were down there and he was using a jerkbait to catch those fish in the trees. And 4-day total, he got himself a Century Belt in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the bass world goes, I'm sorry, what? What do you mean? We can do this? And I remember it because I was sitting there going, I'm not ever going to catch another fish in jerkbait in the trees again in the fall.
2020.
Yep. It was that year. Earlier in the year, it was a smallmouth guys. It was those two events that I specifically remember.
He won by 29 pounds.
Yeah. It was just stupid. It was stupid. And that was the event that really, now all the crappie guys, the smallmouth guys, and the largemouth guys realize we can use this technology to target these fish.
Do you think that's because of the way he won that it was so foreign or so it was so obvious that they were big fish, they were shaped like fish on it, you could see him suspended, he won by 25 pounds. Keith Combs finishes second in that. He owns Lake Fork, owned Lake Fork at the time, beat him by 25 pounds to where it went from I'm not sure what's going on but this is cool to my God, I just watched a fish eat a jerk bait, and the guy's going to not even have to, if there was a 5th day, wouldn't have had to go out. Yeah, exactly. And again, as an angler, I'm not saying I'm on the level of a Patrick Walters. I'm not. But it was something that we had keyed in on, like, because in the fall, your channel swings and things like that. Yeah. And then you're fishing that, and then you're paying attention. You're like, man, what is that over there? You throw it, you're like, that's a big fish. Next thing you know, that piece starts clicking. Yeah. And so, you kind of get to do it by yourself for a while. And then this happened. And now you go in the fall and you're just going to, I know where the creek channel is because that's what the guys are doing. And so what, November 2020? Yep. Did that coincide with a lot of people not having anywhere to go and a lot of them having maybe a little bit of excess income to stem the tide? They couldn't go to eat. They couldn't go out to eat. They couldn't go to, they couldn't go to the mall. They couldn't go, people had disposable. I don't know about you. I don't know anybody that didn't get to work, that couldn't work during that time. Mm-hmm. Like Oklahoma, especially, didn't shut down. We worked. So, but we can't go spend our money elsewhere. Yeah. So all of a sudden it's like, man, I got to raise because look at all this money that I have because I'm not spending it elsewhere. And people didn't know what else to do and they want to get outdoors. So do you think this was happening across the country? Do you think there were other shops that were kind of experiencing the same thing as the Bass Tanker at the time? Were there not many other? Well, at the time there were a few that were already, that may have been in business before us a few years, but by and large, not really. You might have had a few mom and pops, but we were coming up at the right time. As a company, we couldn't have picked a better time to be in business to start up. Were you the number one independent installation of forward-facing sonar in the country? It wasn't even close. We got numbers and reports back from manufacturers, and we have to, in order to have warranty, right? Because we were certified install shop. In order to have warranty, we have to turn in our installs. And we would get reports like, you guys are only second to coastal. And he said, that's a different ocean. Yeah. Oceanic stuff. And they said, that's not even fair to compare to that because of what they do, And so, it was. And now what that ended up doing is it ended up breeding a whole market of a lot of quote unquote experts, rigging shops that just popped up overnight that claim they know what they're doing. And they, quite frankly, I'll stop there, but I think we. So we're in 2020. We're in 2020. This thing's exploding. Like I'm always curious. So like, how does your relationship? What did your relationship like with the? I know at the Bass Tank you guys sell a lot of different. Yep. It's whatever you want. You want a Bird, a Lowrance, a Garmin. You can get it installed. Yep. You do whatever you want. How does that relationship work between you and the manufacturer? As far as so like, do you have a relationship with people at like, let's go back to 2020. All of a sudden they've got to be looking at it going, okay, there's X number of units that are going out. Yep. These guys are moving an astronomical amount. And obviously you can't compete against big box. Right. But outside of the big box, like especially with where they're located and stuff. I mean, are you talking to the guys at Garmin going, holy cow, they need literally like give me as many of these things as you can physically get.
And it's interesting because I don't think even Garmin understood what they had done just based on, expected production. Anytime you have a new product, you're not going to put 15 machines out if you don't think you can sell them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to build one machine, see how it goes. Well, that obviously that one machine can only produce so many pieces of equipment per day, whatever. And so I think it took Garmin a little bit to say, okay, this is something that's going to be here and we need to ramp up production. Because we would turn around and make an order and they're like, what do you mean? You just made an order last week? Yeah, we did. And now we need to triple that, cause it was rabid. It was absolutely rabid is the only way I know how to explain it. And a lot of that had to do with like you said, guys had time, money, and it was really, really cool. Yeah, exactly. And now you look at it and you think that everybody has forward-facing sonar. And I can tell you that that's not true. I still talk to people today that have never even heard of it.
I talk about this on the show all the time. This show, very bubbly.
Yeah.
Very bubble. Like, but that's what I think what makes it work.
Yeah.
Is like, if you look at anything, like how do you find a niche, you find people who are passionate about it, you make the most about it, you do what you can in that. I am fully aware. It's an exceptional bubble.
Yeah.
Cause it does seem like,
yeah,
it is crazy, but you go to the average lake and stuff and you still have guys, how many times have I gone past a dock and a guy's like, hey, you got that thing that you can like see on?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. And he's like, what's under my dock?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And to kind of finish up with the relationship,
because this sounds like a good coke hustling movie. Keep going.
All right.
I mean, it kind of is.
I mean, it felt like that for a bit, it was almost an addiction to some people.
That someone had something on the water that they didn't have.
Yep.
And
that's exactly right. And, as far as the manufacturer go, obviously Garmin being first, we built a name with them, and then it made the other manufacturers say, hey, we really want you to help, so it helped to facilitate the relationship across the board. And so I've got really good relationships with all the manufacturers. And I can tell you the good, bad, ugly about each one, the pros and cons about all of them, and, but I still stand by this statement that I've made several times over the years. I feel like it's a good time to be an angler because when the manufacturers compete for your business and your attention, it leads to innovation, and it leads to them being forced to put out a better product. And so it gives us options. You've always been a bird guy. Great. Bird just released some new units that are fantastic. I'm going to tell you right now, I love them. Lowrance came out with a Pros. They came out with their new HD 3-in-1 transducer. It's a great transducer. If you want to, I have no knowledge of this, so please don't say, hey, Scott's saying, no, I'm just doing what I see. I think Garmin is the next to come out with something, right? Like it's cyclical, like Bird jumps ahead, Lowrance jumps ahead. Well, now it's time for Garmin to come out with something. I expect within the next, if I had to guess, I would say within the next 12 months. I don't know, because I don't know where they're at in the cycle. The minute the LVS 34 came out, for example, they were working on its replacement. They all are.
Yeah.
Humminbird's
just like vehicles.
That's right. Humminbird's already working on the replacement of Mega Live 2, just like.
By the way, I fished with Mega Live 2 for the first time over up at the Mississippi River, up at Bartuzek. It's all birded out.
Impressions.
And it's different. But I made a 65-foot cast on a current seam with the boat moving.
Yeah.
And I watched my bait fall.
Yep.
And I was like, they did it.
Yeah. It is a huge leap forward from Mega Live.
And it looked good.
Yeah.
Like I was with Bart, I was like, if we're going to the lake and we find him on these things, like we're fishing out of my boat.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, that's fine. He's like, but this is pretty good stuff. Just get the boat with it first, because we both were practicing out there.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a huge leap forward. I was worried when I saw the initial. It wasn't even the release. It was still in beta, and I was like, man.
But birds, there's just bird guys.
Yep.
And they have so many cool features. Like I used to run the 1197, and then the 1197C, and then I got the 1198, had it on the RAM mount on the side. Like that was like the bad. I thought, Kelly Jordan told me that was the best side imaging that it was out at the time, and it had the only mapping that you could do the water levels and offset it. And like
and that's what I'm saying. Burn makes a good product. And I know some people are pretty hacked off about the drop off of the Helix and Solix units, but you have to understand that it gets to a point. The Helix, we were on Gen 4 generations, and at some point you can't even buy the manufacturer that was making that chipset doesn't even make that chipset anymore. It gets to a point where you can't even buy the components to make that, and so you beat your head against the wall, or you say, "Hey, it's time to cut this off and move forward." And it stinks to be on that edge. I get it, but at some point you have to. And the direction that Humminbird is going right now, it sure looks like for the future this is going to be better. It looks like they're trying to streamline things a lot more. I really like the new Explorers. The operator interface is so much better. It's fast. It seems a lot more intuitive than what birds have been in the past. I just like the options of all the units out there right now. I love the pros. And Garmin, the Echo Maps are still what they are. I love that they came out with a 1643. One thing I think is very interesting, even going all the way back to 19, and it's a trend. Like you talked about the bubble. So many people bought that 9-inch unit when it first came out. And
I was one of them.
It's because they wanted to, I don't know if this is going to be a thing, so I don't want to spend too much money. There's still a few people that bought the 12, but that was like, whoa, someone bought a 12. It was like
Kevin Rogers was a 12-inch guy.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, absolutely.
That sounded weird, but
it's
right off the bat, I remember he's always had the big screens. I remember
that's exactly
him
right.
One winter at a tiny little lake down here.
Yeah,
this big giant. I'm like, good Lord.
Yeah, exactly.
I literally that's how I got to know Kevin Rogers. I walked up to him and I was like, hey, you're Kevin Rogers, the crappie guy. Can I look at your unit?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So you still had a few of those people, but it was a 9 or a 10. That was going to be the question. Most people were in a 9, and then there was a transition to like, man, the same customer would come back and be like, I think I want that 10 or maybe that 12. And then as it happens, you let that cycle a couple years, and now it's not a 12, it's I want the 16. And or a few people are doing the aftermarket bigger units, and that's a niche thing. But as a rigging shop, that gets real fun because there's only so much space up there at the front of the boat, and but anything, a 16 and a 12, if you're going to run 2 units up there, a 16 and a 12, we can make fit pretty cleanly on any boat. We start getting bigger than that, it starts getting really, really custom. Hamner's was a prime example. He decided to run that 19 this year. I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't love that. I didn't love it. But we made it work, and I told him, I said, Justin, if you're gonna run this is what you're limited to. Can you stomach this? And at first he was like, man, I don't like that. I'm like, you're going to have to give something up then. Well, then eventually we were able to, the joys of having him there to put him up there and position things. Now he's like, now I've gotten used to it. He said, I love it. I actually really, really love it. This fits really well.
So I ask you about all that stuff because I think there was a shift where this became like, where it wasn't a trend. People actually saw the benefits. So if you saw my garage out there, so many empty kid cab, I'm spring cleaning, right? Going through it. And I came across this, which is the old school Hydrowave.
Yep.
And then, I had the KVD crawfish chip that was in there that had the expensive. And I remember there was probably a 3 or 4 year period where I would not fish without this thing.
Yep.
And you saw KVD and Gerald, all the TH Marine guys really, really pushing about, custom patterns, tournament patterns, all that. And the thing about this is I was always on the fence about it, right? There would be times where a shad would flick and I'd be like, Hydrowave.
Yeah.
Then there'd be times where I'm like, I think this is terrifying everything that's within listening range. You had some guys who thought that it masked the sound of the trolling motor. Other guys who thought feeding frenzy. Some guys thought it was a complete hoax.
Yeah.
Other guys thought that it was the only reason why they were cashing checks.
Yep.
it seems like there's a lot of stuff in electronics that come out. And like I said, I'm not talking bad about this. I literally, when I found it, was like, oh, I want to put this back on. I need to get, I looked it up on TH Marine. I have no affiliation with them. I was like, okay, I'll save up $450, get one of those and put it back on, just because who knows.
Right.
But there was a time where every boat had this, and it was all, their tournament pattern was what Hydro Wave setting did they have it on.
Yeah.
And this was like live scope for about 6 months, in my opinion. And then live scope just kept going.
Yeah. Live scope.
Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think so.
When was the last time you saw one of those? Do you have one on your boat?
No, I've always been on the fence with these. Plain and simple. I've always been on the fence with them. I understand the reason why they're thinking it, and it makes sense. But I've not seen it personally where it was successful consistent enough for me to justify it. Now, I'm not telling you if there's a guy out there that swears by it that you're wrong. I'm saying me personally, from where I sit, it just didn't justify it. I'm also a guy, believe it or not, I'm a pretty simple guy. I like the front of my boat to be really clean. I didn't want another thing up there like getting in my way.
I'm the same way.
I just let me have my space, but we've taken more of these off. People come in, hey, we're upgrading electronics, pull that Hydro Wave off.
See,
then I don't know. It was very, very interesting. Yeah. But at the same time, like, hey, my speaker's busted. This unit's still working just fine, but my speaker's busted. Can you replace the speaker? Okay. But it is a question of, all right, we're putting this live scope or this active target, this Mega Live on here. There's only so much room on the front of a trolling motor, and we've got a bunch of cables going down there, and given the choice between the two, I'm going to take my forward facing over a Hydro Wave any day of the week.
Let's fast forward to 2023, 24, the arms race.
Okay. All right.
So that was last year, wasn't it?
We're in 25, so that's 2 years ago.
2 years ago. When was the last year that they had zero restrictions?
It would have been last year.
Yeah,
right?
last year.
Yeah.
So it would have been the fall of 2023 going into 2024.
Yeah.
I would assume with what you do that you want to put as much crap on a boat as you possibly as much boat stuff on a boat as you possibly can. And say, look at this. This is a $56,000 rigging job here.
Yeah.
But that being said, are you glad they put restrictions on it? Because how were you able to put, you saw a Schmidt came out with 7 units on his boat. We were seeing 5 transducers. Like, go through the Wild West time, and as a rigging shop, some of the calls and things that you had to go through of what people wanted to do. Once again, in my opinion, FOMO. I don't want to miss the fish while I'm idling. I see this guy, he's got it on a turret. I want to be able to do all that. And was it too much at a point?
So I'm actually a little bit different. You're probably not going to hear many riggings. So from a business standpoint, to your point, it would sure make a lot more sense for me to sell everything I possibly can. Yeah. If someone's going to be willing to let me spend $50,000 on a rigging job, let them.
Which some guys just walk in and say, "I want the top of the line and the biggest of everything. They call me when it's done."
They do. And there are a few of those, but I'm more of a practical guy. This is where, when I talk to customers, I try to get to know my customers, understand what they're trying to accomplish, and if we can do it with $10,000 worth of stuff instead of 50, that's what I'm going to sell you. That's not a great business model. It's not, because you take as much money as you can as what I just can't do business that way. I want to be honest and transparent with people. One thing I will tell you when it comes to the Wild West, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but it's the truth of the matter. The separation, and not in fishing ability, not in skill, but just the out of touchness with the professional angler, with your average everyday tournament angler or weekend angler, that gap has gotten huge. And what I mean by that is, I never got a call that said, "Hey, I saw so-and-so with 6 units on their boat. They had 4 different forward facing, 2 up front and 2 off the back. I want that set up." Never happened. I have had them call me and say, "Hey, I saw so-and-so. I like his clean setup where he's got 2 units at the front, 2 units at the back." I've had that. But when that Wild West happened, The pros just ran off and leave it. And I'm not saying they should have or shouldn't have. I'm just saying it separated that gap. And I think it had more of a negative impact because the average everyday guy says, I can't afford to spend 50 grand. If this is what it's going to take to go catch a fish, I'm going to go take up golf.
Yeah.
Like I firmly believe that.
Almost like backfired.
It backfired a little bit. So I have had several customers that came in that just kept adding, it initially was this job. And then they're like, well, I also want to do this. Oh, hey, while it's there, do this. And next thing I know, I was like, hey, this is too much, because there is a point where it's information overload where, hey, I've got 3 transducers and one's in perspective and one's shooting this way and one's shooting this way. And you're trying to take in all this information and you stop fishing. Whereas if you just have one transducer, whether it's side imaging, whether it's forward, I can focus on that one thing right there. Eliminate some of the variables. How many times I always say the drunk monkey syndrome. Look at your tracks on a given lake, especially in the wintertime. You put the trolling motor, and we enjoy some of these small bodies of water around here, and you can actually put the trolling motor down and just go hunting, right? And then you go back and look at your tracks and go, what was I doing?
Dude, I've done that in Bassmaster Open practices over the last 2 years where I'm like, dude, I just did donuts in the middle of a damn creek for 3 days of practice, went out, caught 14 pounds of fish and finished 100th. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what am I doing with my life? I've also had other ones where I've dialed in and top 10'd it and was like, I'm so dialed in. Yeah, that's exactly right. And now imagine trying to do that with 2 or 3 different transducers. You're trying to process that data. It gets to the point where you're like, dude, I'm not even going to make a cast. Well, when I go out fishing, I want to make casts. I don't catch a fish if I don't make a cast. Now, I do enjoy throwing 2 fish, but you can just have so much information. And again, my average customer, a lot of them are upgrading. This is still new to them. They don't get 7 days a week to practice. They're not at that level where that's not their job. They've got a day job they've got to go to. They get limited time to really hone those skills. And so if you start just blasting them with information, they've got to take it in pieces. Down, and they've got to take it in pieces. And that's not because they're not intelligent or they're not able. It's just you can only take in so much information in a given time, whether it's life information, like, hey, I've got the family, the kids, the job. Oh, and then I've got to digest this as well. That's a tough ask, in my opinion. And so I'm always a proponent, hey, let's start small. We can always add to. Let's not go to the top end unless we've been on it. We know what we're going to do. And I have those guys that come in and say, hey, this is my second boat. Now I know. It's like building your first house. If you buy your first house, don't build it, because you're going to look at it and go, oh gosh, I didn't think about this. You need to buy and live in a couple houses to know what you like and don't like before you say, okay, now I'm going to build my house the way I want it. Now that's where we kind of come in, because we do see it every day and say, hey, you're not going to like this, or you're going to like this. And it's everything from, guys come in and say, I do get those guys that want the top line. There was a guy that referenced, Justin Hamner's setup. He's like, man, I really like that setup. I'm just getting back into bass fishing. Basically, he graduated college, relocated from do some national weather events. I'm trying not to call him out specifically, but really cool. He's like, I graduated. I've got a good job now. I can actually afford to rig this boat the way I want it now. Timmer?
No.
Have you seen he's a bass fishing guy?
No, that's not him. He's a young man over in Arkansas. Okay. So, and he's like, and so I get caught up trying to save people money when reality is they would let me spend as much as I wanted with them. A lot, I get those guys, and I can't do business that way. Like I want to be fair. I want to be honest. And, but that is a spot, but that doesn't happen if Hamner has 6 units on his boat. Yeah. Again, nobody's done that. I would love to put the package together. After the Classic, we actually did that. We said, hey, this is the Hamner package. This is what's on his boat. This is buy this and you get exactly what he had. And I sold 0 of those. Now, what's crazy to me is I actually sold that package just a la carte. Same price at the end of the day, but I just put it together a nice, clean bundle. But someone seeing that sticker shock of like what that is, like, man, I'm not going to buy that. Mm-hmm. But then when I literally pieced it together, and then I pieced it together, they're like, okay. And I'm like, dude, this is literally the same price. This is just a simple bundle. And so there's a psyche to it as well that, it's just sticker shock, I think, and some guys come in and say, I want the best. And I always ask, when you say the best, do you mean the best or do you have a budget in mind? Because the best lets me run away with it, and I'm going to give you the top of the line? Or are you saying no, the best for this budget? And I don't care what it is. If you tell me you've got $1,000 budget, I'm going to try to find whatever it is we can make that work. And so anyway, you let me squirrel.
No. So here's where I want to go on this. And like I said, we're both a little bit on time frame, so we can't go 3 hours today. But this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. So we kind of get a little bit of the history, the background. I think it's easy to get lost up into the moment. And now that there's a couple years in the past, just put things into perspective a little bit. But here's my question. So you are a engineer. So, I've had to stop you multiple conversations and say, Scott, just tell me in Matt terms, effing button to press and what setting it needs to be on. I don't care what's happening.
But you need to know why to push the button, Matt.
No. So here's my question to you.
And
I wanted to get all that backstory so people understand this. So we've got NPFL invitationals, BPP, elites, opens, all sorts of stuff with all this different thing. The one thing that hasn't been tested is, I'm going to call it restrictor plate racing.
Okay.
Where you have, you've got the 32 and then the 34, and I'm assuming there's a 36 and a 38 and then a Gen 2 after it. Everything's going up and up. Just like you could make a car go a lot freaking faster around a racetrack if they wanted. Does the technology exist? Can Garmin, can Lowrance, can Humminbird? Does the technology exist to create a limited transducer to where you can see shapes, you can see the brush pile, you can't throw a 3-inch minnow on a fish 140 feet away or 130 feet? Is there the technology that if one of the organizations wanted to say, listen, we don't want to take your ability to fish in front of the boat without blind away from you, but we also don't want you to be able to put a 32nd ounce jig in a 4-inch minnow 3 inches in front of a bass's mouth and know how big it is and what it is, to where you're basically concept scoping, kind of like how Roy Hawk just won the Lake Havasu Open, or to where you could say, hey, this thing black screens 50 feet in front of the boat.
Yeah.
Do you think they're working on that? Does that technology, just think restrictor plate racing, forward facing sonar?
So the simplest way to answer that is, as the technology sits right now, it's a sonar.
Sorry, Alex at Lowrance has a restrictor plate transducer, the Eagle i9. Continue.
The Eagle i9 is not a bad little transducer for $1,000.
That's what I'm saying.
For $1,000,
you want to put it on a John boat and put it in a pond. Anyway,
absolutely, yes.
Answer with the question.
So the restrictor plate, as far as let's start with the technology, and I won't get too far in the weeds. I'll keep this Matt friendly. It's a sonar signal. It's going to go as far as it goes and comes back, right? So you can't restrict that as the technology sits right now, because it's like my voice is going to carry a certain distance, right? I can amplify it by raising and lowering it, so a whisper is not going to travel as far. So you could throttle that down, sure, with intensity, things like that, but you're going to lose a lot of resolution, to the point where it may not even be used, because the technology is pretty well maxed out. But what you could do is, right now on my Garmin, Lowrance, whatever, I can sit there and hit the forward range to go out 200 feet. That's just a screen that's displaying it, because even if I'm displaying 30 feet, the beam is still shooting 200, right? So they could just with software say, hey, the furthest you can range out on your screen, the range of the screen is only going to go to 100 feet. So anything beyond that is, or maybe it's 50, whatever that number is, they could easily limit the range with just a software update to say the range will not go any further than this. Now that's going to create a black market for older updates, by the way, that I have. I'm just saying, because people are going to be like, well, I didn't want to do this update. Now, that may
be a tournament deal. This would affect 100 people at the Elite Series or at the Opens or whatever it is level.
And now it comes down to, money. Do those tournament organizations have the power to go to Lowrance, Humminbird, and Garmin and say, hey, we want you to dedicate engineering time, money
for something that's only going to affect 100 and make your product worse? They're going to say, get lost.
Yeah, I think they're
$1 billion company. there's a couple $1,000,000 in here. Do whatever the hell you guys want to do.
Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to, because they're going to say, the tournament guys you're talking about probably don't buy this stuff anyway. They probably get sponsorships.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my next question to you then. With everything getting better and better, so right now, like I could have one LVS 34 on my boat in the Bassmaster Opens.
Right.
So when, whatever. Some believe I have a 36 because you did a sick twisted thing. I'm probably honestly, I had like 3 EQ guys message me like with the eyeball emojis, and they're like, "I'm gonna be looking at that thing at Leech," and I was like, "Have at it." I said, "That's just Scott's sense of humor."
I'm not sorry.
Anyway, so when the 36 comes out, like where this is just you talking now, and with what you do in your background, like where do the organizations draw the line? So if now you can use a 34, will they up it to a 36, or will they say, even though the 36 is out, we believe that we're going to stay with the 34? Like, how, you see what I'm saying? Like, how do you do that in your opinion as an organization, if you're going to keep it part of the game as it continues? We're only in the second gen right here. I mean, I would.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that are going to happen. As an organization, I don't know what the right answer is, because each organization is making their own rules, right? Bass is doing their thing.
Is that good for your business that there's one without, one with it some of the time, and one with it all the time?
It doesn't really matter as much. It's one of those things that, again, the professional fishing leagues do not have the same power they used to with the advent of social media.
Yeah.
And I'm not throwing shade on any of the pros. Like, that's not what this is. I'm just saying that, unfortunately, because everybody can start a YouTube channel, the influencer market is just as powerful as a professional fisherman. Used to, those were the guys where you got all your information. Now there's a lot of guys that they don't fish tournaments, but they have, instead of spending the time on the water to try to catch fish to compete, they can just spend time on the water messing with things and creating content. And that's hard to compete against. So I'm not going to say it affects or doesn't affect my business. It's good talking points.
Yeah.
It does come up in conversation.
Off topic.
Yeah.
36, 34, 38.
I don't know. 42. I don't know how you limit.
What do the organizations do when they are sponsored by the electronics companies? The electronics company says, look at this 36.
So this is where those don't know, what does the contract say? If like, hey, let's say Garmin, we'll just stay on Garmin just because that's probably the most likely, would be my guess, to come out with the next one, just cyclical, right? Let's say that Garmin is sponsoring Bass, and they say, hey, you have to allow, it's a 1-year deal or a 3-year deal. You have to allow our forward-facing sonar for the next 3 years. You can't make any changes. You can't ban it. You can't do anything.
We have no idea.
And seriously, this is no. I
have no idea personally.
I do not take this like this is just me. Literally,
I just know that Garmin is more important to Bass than Bass is important to Garmin.
Yep. I think that's probably a true statement.
Anyway,
and again, like, you're right. This is just literally the way I see it. There's the first step is, what does the contract say? Whatever that is, that's what they're going to have to be.
So there could be language in the contract that says whatever our latest transducer is, this is approved. This is what you have to allow at this level.
I know all these companies are not going to be dumb, and they're going to have a team of lawyers. They're not going to be that big. I mean, it's Garmin is a multi-billion-dollar company. I bet you they've got a team of lawyers that fine-tooth combed, so whatever that says. But let's pretend that there's no language in there that says that. I think you shoot yourself in the foot if all of a sudden you say, hey, you can't use the latest technology, because it does give you a bad look of saying, wait a minute, why can't you use the latest technology? Because the last thing that an organization, in my opinion, would want is for it to show consumers that there is a gap, that they're not.
And why'd they make the 62 illegal?
That is a question I still don't know, because I read the justification for it, and there was some very technologically wrong statements in there. The 62 cannot see the distances they were saying. The 62 is essentially a 32 with better range. You're going to get the 32 resolution with longer range. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not a 34 that's amped up on, even though it looks like it's amped up on steroids 34. It's not. It's a 32 clarity, just longer range.
I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize you can set a 34 out of 200. And
that's right.
Fish just fine.
That's exactly right. And so when I read that, I'm like, this is not based in fact. This almost feels like fear or just because. And if it's just because, okay, fine.
Sounds like the power breaks. That was a lack of understanding. This is me personally speaking.
Yep.
It was a rush, a snap judgment out of fear rather than an understanding of what the product is actually.
I got a question for you, because I was thinking about this, fishing a little local BFL this weekend, and I don't know why things popping out, but I literally said, it's illegal to troll in a tournament.
Correct.
But what am I standing up here controlling my boat with? What do we literally call a trolling motor? So that literally means that if I am casting and I was out cranking this point, old school cranking, boys, catching fish. It was fun. The wind was blowing me. So as I'm reeling, I'm boat's drifting. So I take the trolling motor and I reposition the boat. Like I just turn the boat so I could get back into the wind.
I've talked with Bass ad nauseum about
How is that not?
So here's the definition. You cannot move your bait with a motor. Your motor cannot be the cause of moving your bait. That's why you can drift on the St. Lawrence. That's why you can do all that, because the
problem is, by that very definition, if I'm reeling, if I'm at a taut line and I'm reeling and I move my boat, that motor is moving that bait.
Technically,
but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about technicalities here.
Yes.
We're talking about the letter law, because that's how they justified banning it.
And when I talked to him about it, it is an extremely hard to enforce, because at the time there were no trolling motors that went backwards.
Yep.
They got a whole new animal on their hands now, because every trolling motor is going to go backwards now. And then the same guys that were bitching that it was easier to.
What they effectively did is they killed a market that was developing that they don't realize, and that would have been a spot lock, anchor mode, rear trolling motor, being able to pin the back of the boat. So I pull up I want to fish this windy point, but instead of having to face the boat into the wind and then throw backwards, I could have pulled up and faced that point. I'm not even talking about for using sonar. I mean, I'm talking about just cranking, dragging a jig, Carolina rig, or whatever. Mm-hmm. There was an emerging market that would have had. What
would have happened was the two motors on the back would have allowed your boat to stay, and then you would have been spot locked to where you could scope. So it would have with your foot. So it would have been basically an effective turret.
Yep. But that, you think anybody's going to dedicate the money to?
Wrong companies came out with that.
Yep.
They weren't big enough to make an impact, and they weren't big enough to stand up for themselves, and they got squashed.
Yep. I think you're right. But then the other companies that would have came out with that stuff saw that, said, okay, we're not going to dedicate their resources to it. Mm-hmm. I could come back to that.
So
did I get off on a tangent?
No, we both got off on a tangent. That's my favorite tangent. If I ever get fined or blackballed by Bass,
it's going to be on that hill.
It will be because of my statements related to their handling of power breaks.
Yeah. And
I've been exceptionally honest with them.
Yeah.
Some would say I've gone back and listened to things and been like, oh, I should not have said that. Like, should I drop that show? But I'm genuinely passionate about it.
Well, and I think it's fair, because I think that if we're going to make rules, if the data came out tomorrow, the actual data, not some guy claiming that I know a biologist that says this. No, I want the actual study that came out tomorrow that said, forward-facing sonar is decimating our lakes.
Yeah.
I would be like, okay, we need to take a look. I am data-driven. Let's take the emotion out of it. Let's let the data take us where we're going to go, because I do want future generations. I'm a relatively young man. I want to be able to catch fish until I can't walk anymore. I don't want to be part of the problem. But right now, there's no evidence of that. Are the fish harder to catch? Sure they are, but it's not because they're not there. It's because they're instinctual creatures, and they start putting, even though they don't have central nervous system, they feel pressure. Mm-hmm. They know to survive, and they start feeling a boat or something like that. Like, I've seen this minnow 5,000 times. Why? I mean, think about any new bait that came out, the Whopper Plopper, dude.
Whopper Plopper, Alabama rig, chatterbait,
just crazy. You can still catch them on it, but not at the same clip. Mm-hmm. The Nico rig, like the Mickey rig, any of those things, this little dice bait that's out right now, the new craze.
You see this. This is the next
If you're gonna hand me a dice, are you gonna hand me a dice?
I've got dice. Don't open that package.
Does it? What am I looking at right now?
There's the dice.
I feel like you've been to Japan.
Have you seen the visible tomato line?
No.
The name of it is Visible Tomato.
Okay. All right. Matt has all the cool toys here.
The next thing is the action figure. It was like $20 for that pack. You guys are Nico rigging that.
Are you gonna have any fish catches on that yet, sir?
Did you see what Koyo was throwing?
Uh-uh.
That thing, it looked like he had like stepped in a cow patty in a field. And then he just hooked it, and then it dried, and then he just hooked it. I mean, it was the wildest thing. It was.
I mean, it just shows you that sometimes we
look at the detail on that.
Well, I see it. And it shows you that sometimes we outsmart ourselves. That fish are naturally curious. I mean, how many times do you see fish following a bait? They have no interest in eating that bait. They're just following because they're curious.
Not that much.
Yeah. Anybody besides Matt just watching fish follow
You gotta
bait.
be around him for him to follow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe not you, but other people. But fish will eat things that you're like, what did you think that was? And they thought it was food. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they thought it was. They thought they could put it in their mouth and it was digestible.
Let's knock out a couple questions and we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
There was a question. I can't find it right now. Yes. So I talked Tallman into coming on the show once a year to give a yearly update.
Yeah.
He was several Coors Lights deep when he agreed to that.
Yeah.
So I've yet to broach that subject to follow through on it. But that is on the table to get him to come in.
I hope
once
so.
a year just to give a live update.
Yeah.
Last I talked to him, he was really pissed that the turkeys were roosting over the property line. And he could not figure out how to get them back on the shootable side of the property line.
Yeah.
There's a question there. It was a question about your reconditioned units. How do you know that they're reconditioned? How do you know that they work? How do you know, like, what's that whole process to where guys can have confidence in one of the reconditioned units?
So there's a difference in reconditioned and used. Used is I took it on trade. We verified it to power on, things like that. We typically sell those with a warranty that we provide. The reconditioned are reconditioned from a manufacturer. They're going to come in a box and it's going to say recertified or reconditioned, and they're going to come with a manufacturer warranty, typically a year. And of all of them that I've ever sold, I've only had 2 fail, and they failed within the first 30 days, and manufacturer took care of them with no issues. So
that was Jim that asked that. It wasn't a setup question. I actually have to pick the question up on the screen right now.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine. But yeah, so the recertified, reconditioned, whatever you want to call them, are manufacturer. They're not us doing it. It's actually manufacturer reconditioned. And I never know when I'm going to get those. That's basically I get contacted. Hey, we've got X number, whatever. Do you want them? Yes, I do. And we send them, because if I can save some people money, I will.
Any plans on expanding the bass tank to other areas of the country?
Where's that person? Where are you from? I don't
know. Frankly.
So I will tell you this. I'm always working on something, and I'm not saying it's related to this subject, but I might have some big news coming later this year. Teaser. Huh? I'm always looking at options, and I would love to have a bass tank in all 50 states. Maybe not Alaska.
I'm going to Alaska in June.
The bass tank, Alaska. Get up there with all.
You could scope some. You could definitely scope rainbows on lakes.
Yeah.
You would have tough time in the Kenai because it's so currenty.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually just set up a boat with a guy that's going up there doing commercial fishing up there in the Kenai. Yeah, that was fun.
You wanted to scope?
No, he's not scoping. I couldn't convince him.
Like radar and all that.
Yeah, just normal. I mean, this commercial fishing.
Why has there not been like a good radar setup for bass boats yet? As often as we
have to run in the
fog and dark and stuff like that. We saw it in that classic where they put a bunch of the wrong radars on the back deck, way too close to people's skulls. But other than that, like I would assume, that I would just think that you would be able to have a radar setting.
So there's a lot of radars, and radars have become more economical that you don't need to see 60 nautical miles because most lakes aren't a couple miles. If you're out in the middle, you're not a couple miles across. And it comes down to just having a pole, because you're right. You don't need to have it head level. You need that thing to be elevated. And then you've got to put your mast light at that point, because that's now officially the highest point, which is doable. But just no one has wanted to bite that off. There's weather radars available, little Sirius pucks, weather radar pucks. PowerPole came out with a new screen, and it's basically a hardened tablet that has Wi-Fi signal, or it has cell signal. And it's really cool because they call it the Vision. You can run all your apps. So you can run the Garmin app, Active Captain. You can run the Lowrance app. You can run the Humminbird app. You can put Google Earth Pro on it, and it allows you to see the mapping side by side. So if I'm running a Garmin or a Lowrance or a Humminbird, but I want to know what the mapping would look like on this lake for, what my Humminbird compared to my Lowrance does, I can literally pull it up through the app because it's app based. Or if I've got some other mapping app, I could see something like that happening as well. That Vision just came out, and we're seeing some good interest in that. I mean, I'm interested in it because it's just really cool, because you always have a question, like, I do get that a lot. Hey, I want this unit for my side imaging, but I want this unit for my mapping. But I could see that tying into it. But again, we need active radar. The question is, and this is what it's always going to come down to for a manufacturer. If they came out with a 6-inch radar, we just need to see a couple nautical miles. Okay, cool. Sweet. It's not as detrimental. We can, have it there. Are there enough buyers to make it worth the engineering time and the production?
I see. No, there's not, because there's not a lot of guys that are running a bass boat in the fog for
that's
$1 billion company.
That's
try
right.
to incorporate it.
And unfortunately, that's what's going to be the holdup. So if you're going to do a radar, it's going to be a one-off.
Last question. How many of your customers are 65 and up and retired versus
a lot?
Young workers?
A lot. So early on, that was probably my major, that was probably 75% of my demographic, going back to the history of it. It was funny because you think about it.
Guys who saved their whole lives, and they're like, dude, I literally saved for to be able to enjoy this in my life.
Now I've got my toys.
And
so, not throwing any shade, but my 65 and older crowd couldn't send me a text message or a picture of what was going on with the screen, but I'm teaching them live scope.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just giddy about it. I'm like, give the phone to your 9-year-old grandson so he can send me this. And they would, like, oh, cool, this is it. And it was funny, but now that has shifted a little bit. It's not so heavy there, but I still have a lot of people, I would say at least 30%. I would say it's a solid 30 to 40% of my demographic is 65 and older. That retired, I get a lot of retired. I know they're retired because I'm sitting there behind the desk and I can hear them on the water and they're fishing, and I'm working. I'm like, great. But
Scott.
Yeah, exactly. But, we work through it, and it's very appreciative of them. The younger crowd is coming on, but the middle, 30 and older, it is by far 90% of my market as far as my customer base. But that 65 and older is a large portion of that as well.
All right, I'm going to pull it up. I got the website up there. Anything currently? Let's click on sales. A bunch of batteries, all the Pro Guide stuff.
So the Pro Guide, just so you know, I'll give you a quick rundown, just because we've been in a weird batteries across the country. I don't care what manufacturer, have been hard to get. We just got a huge drop of Pro Guide batteries. They just arrived. They're new batteries, they're new upgraded size with the NEMA connections, things like that. Those
are the ones that were at the classic.
Those are the ones of the classic.
Oh,
just got a big load of those,
Yeah.
and you can get yours right after I get mine. It's inbound. But literally just hit on Friday, so we were really stocked up, because I was getting to the point where I'm like, man, I don't have batteries installed for these installs. Luckily, we had pulled them aside, but we were 2 months out going, I don't know if I'm gonna have a battery by then. Well, those have hit, so those are really cool. I'm really excited about those because I do have the NEMA connections. They're bigger sizes, smaller cases, just more power. We've got the Explorers in stock. We've got some Mega Live 2s in stock. Those have been going really fast. We've actually got the Recon trolling motors. We've got a couple 48-inch Recon trolling motors from Lowrance. Those have been a hot item. I say we have them right now. We may not,
because
the new pivot style from Lowrance that they announced forever ago and had production issues, but they seem to have got that. They're starting to ship now, but we've actually got 2 of those in stock. And then we've got the live scope bundles, the 10-inch Garmin live scope bundle for $2,500, and then the 12-inch for $3,300. So, and then of course,
on here?
Bundles could be under bundles or sales.
Yeah, it's not under sales.
It should be under sales. It's because normally that's $4,400 for the 12-inch, and
there's a 10-inch
10-inch for
Echo Map Ultra 2 106 SV and Panoptix Live Scope plus OVS 34 system bundle.
Yep,
for
$24.99. Yep, that's it.
That is under products and bundles.
Okay, that should be under sales. I'll look at that. I'll look at that.
Under sales.
It should be under sales. I don't know why it's not. I don't know why it's not on
your website.
I know. That's
looking at it right.
Listen, I have about 17,000 SKUs. I can't keep them straight, But
what the heck? What makes this one so expensive?
Which one is it?
The $7,300 one. The GPS Map 86 16-inch Marine Charter Plot and Panoptix Live Scope. Oh, that's just a 16-inch.
A 16-inch bundle. Yeah. That's why.
So $2,500, you're good to go.
Yep. I have a 24-inch Garmin right now, by the way.
The live scopes are not on sale. These are just like deals and bundles.
Right. Those are
not because someone said live scopes on sales because the 36 is coming. No.
And I want to reiterate, guys, that I have no knowledge that a 36 is like on the short horizon. If I step back and I say, if you had to put $1,000 down right now,
there's something coming. There's been something coming from the beginning of time. That's why we're not all still dragging window weights across the
exactly.
bottom.
That's my point.
I never drag a window weight, but I know guys who did.
Yeah.
I met a guy named Rooster, Lake Gunnersville. Talked like this. He said, "I found the shell beds back in my day.
Yeah,
we tie a window weight to rope, and drag across the bottom of the river. When you felt that vibration, that's how you knew where the shell was. And we go back, we throw a jelly worm on it."
That isn't that live scope in real time.
That's literally how he talked. It was the coolest thing ever.
That is kind of awesome.
I was like, "State your name." He's like, "Rooster."
All right, please. I'm okay.
He's like, "I've been fishing Gunnersville since 3 years before they filled it."
All right, he knows a thing or two then. But no, I mean, technology is always advancing. Garmin just released their new Pro trolling motor. The Quest, obviously has been out for a little bit, but it's a great motor. I think Lowrance will come out with a new scissor style, to replace, call it the Ghost 2, whatever it. There's always going to be something new coming. I do think Garmin is up next. It would make logical sense that Garmin would release something, whether it's a new unit, whether it's a new live scope. I don't know, but I expect it within, I think this time next year, we're talking about something. Yeah. I just don't know what it is,
I would like to throw this out there. If you buy something on thebasstank.com and you mention that you heard about it on BTL, Scott will answer 10 unrelated questions.
Thanks, Matt. I will just as good customer service, but I'm going to count. Now I have to count them like that was 10.
That's a joke. I will say this. Scott will never say this also. So, if you have issues with your stuff, he can answer them, but it's not his job to answer shit that was installed improperly, that was not a Bass Tank deal. He is not a self-help hotline. He is not a my transducer doesn't work hotline. You kind of earn that with your business with the Bass Tank. So I know we've had, every time you've come on in the past, you've been inundated with good intended people who, because there are not a lot of questions out there, and it is frustrating to have electronics issues because I've dealt with them, especially when you do updates and when you're doing something right and it's not an install and you're like, well, can we fix this inside? You want to make sure that you're doing it. So Scott is not a something that was installed 3 years ago at a Bass Pro Shops. Don't call Scott and ask him how to fix it. If you want to upgrade with the Bass Tank, build a relationship with them, put the stuff in, know that it's installed, get your harness kit, and then you kind of understand it and
Yeah.
you earn the relationship.
Yeah, and it's a tough position for me because I want to give my information away.
Yeah,
it's
as
not.
I said, guy has to stop giving out his cell number, but people call the shop.
They call the shop. I wade through a lot of non-customers that did not buy from us, and I can't shut up. I help them anyway.
Yeah,
and it's tough because
that's why I said that. I knew you wouldn't say that. I hope I didn't come across.
No, it's tough because I don't want to turn people away because I want people to realize that the next time they buy, they should buy from me because this is why. But at the same time, I've had to prioritize customers because they're the ones that were willing to spend their hard-earned money with me. So if someone's having a technical issue, 2 people are having a technical issue, I've got to call the customer back first. And I hate being in that position, but unfortunately that's the way of it. Otherwise, I'm not going to be here to answer those questions, because if we don't make any money, I am in business and that's how I pay my bills. If we don't make any money and I go away, who's going to answer those questions? Because I promise you, if I'm not doing this, I'm not answering technical questions.
Which, we need to wrap this up. I need to go look at my graph out there.
I think that's why he wanted me in studio so I could look at his graph. That's what I firmly believe.
I personally didn't do anything, right? This is one of those weird ghost glitches, not ghost, but like Ghost in the Machine.
This is the nature you run when you flip back and forth into perspective and forward, for sure. That's not a you thing.
I was like looking at it and I was like, "Boy, I really screwed that up." And I called Scott and I was like, "Scott," I was like, I said, I literally, everything that he has, I have step 1, look at unit. Step 2, right button that looks like star on right side of unit, hit twice. Scroll down 3 times. You know what I mean? But that's how I learned how to do all of this stuff. And I did everything right. And I'm like looking at it and I'm like, this is not right.
Yep.
And I called you and you started laughing and you're like, "Oh, it happened to you too."
Yep.
But that's going to happen. I mean, we're talking about crazy technology that gets the crap beat out of it. It left out in snow, rain, wind, waves, thousands of miles, and we expect it to
be
work flawlessly. Take a laptop and just chuck it down your steps 3 or 4 times and see how it works.
That's right. If you're going to carry your laptop from your computer, most people are going to cradle it 2 hands, set it softly down. Imagine just slinging that across the kitchen table. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Now, the next time you drive down the lake, look at your trolling motor just bouncing.
Oh, dude, everything. It's amazing.
I think boats are an amazing piece of equipment for what we put them through. Whether it's our lovely Oklahoma roads or whether it's the lake. The boat in general, it's amazing we don't have more problems. And so then you're taking a very sensitive piece of electronic equipment and putting it through the same rigor. So, yeah, we'll get you dialed in.
Anything else you want to get in here before we wrap this up?
I don't think we've got the time because, I'll do this very quickly. We mentioned the batteries and all these new batteries with bigger capacity.
Yeah.
One thing that people need to keep in mind of, a lot of guys are like, "Hey, I'm just going to use my existing charger." Understand that if I use a bigger battery and I draw that thing down, it's great that I can run for days, but it's going to take longer to charge that. So when you buy a battery, if you're going to a lithium battery, consider the charger as well. If you're a guy that fishes,
can we just do a whole power show?
We can.
Because that encompasses all of that.
Okay.
The next time you're in studio, we're going to do a whole power show.
Okay.
Because we've done units, we've done that, we've done that, but we have not done a power show. I'll probably maybe bring Pate or someone in from Pro Guide to talk a little bit about it, and then from your end there.
Absolutely.
How you determine if you're getting ample power, what it means, how it is, where it comes from.
I like it. Yeah. Okay. I'll shut up. But just a teaser. That's
like a 2-hour show.
Yeah. I could get in a rabbit hole. I'll shut up though.
So. No. That's good. So, guys are saying definitely need a bass tank in East Tennessee.
Okay. Hey, can I pimp out your? Am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
You say whatever you want.
The BTL. Comment down here, guys. If the bass tank was going to expand, where do you guys want us? Where would you want me to expand?
We're just going to pick where they live.
Well, probably, but I want to see, hey, this is a good test for you to show you where everyone's listening.
Yeah.
Well, or don't. Send that to Matt.
You can come over here and see where everyone's listening from. Shockingly, we have a pretty strong Australian contingent.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. There's dudes trying it over here.
Yeah.
But I'd say we've got a lot of we've got some I don't know if they call them long haul truckers, but a couple guys who drive across Australia.
Wow.
Which I think would be a pretty gnarly gig,
that
especially with everything that like, is hopping and running.
Do you guys ever see dinosaurs out there? Like there's always the rumors of dinosaurs. Like you're going to get me on a tangent here. The nerd in me is coming out. But, the prehistoric creatures that live out there in the outback that nobody sees. You ever seen
Memphis, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Michigan, North Carolina, upstate New York, SLR. Yeah. I do think like the further north you get, the more the short, well, you got more rigging season for it, but the more the guys are spending.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll finish with this because we live in a bubble. I always say, we live in an echo chamber, and you drive around and you say everyone's got forward facing sonar. I'm seeing a trend where the walleye guys are really starting to grab a hold of this.
Oh,
they're kind of where
you can catch some freaking walleye.
Oh yeah, I'm taking a trip up north. Hey, Minnesota friends, I'll be up there in a couple of weeks to Mille Lacs. You see my boat? Please come say hey. If you're a BTL listener, love it. Maybe I can get Matt to give me a hat.
There in the first week of June.
You'll be
4th or the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
So I will be up there Memorial Day weekend and beyond that. So you will be coming as I'm leaving, basically. I'll
actually be in Mexico, then I'll be in Arkansas, and then I'll be up in Minnesota.
That's a lot of different style of fishing, but
it is
a lot of fun.
And one of them's frog hunting.
Oh, even Arkansas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Todd Seisner in Fisherman.
Yeah.
Todd.
I know who he is. Yeah.
So Steve Bowman, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame.
Nice.
Bassmaster.
So are you going to gig? Are you gigging? Is that what you're doing? Or
I have no idea how he's going to have his catch.
Oh, please video this. This is going to be fantastic. Yeah. I love that for you.
I'm going to throw some music back up and
all right.
Appreciate it. We need to get back on the water. We've had some good times on the water.
Yes, we have.
Recently. So, all right. If you guys check it out. If you have any interest in any of that, hit me up, Matt@basszone.com. I can guard the gate of questionings, but if not, you go to thebasstank.com, TheBassTank.com, and check out all the deals that they have there. Always appreciate your knowledge and willingness to share, and in some cases overshare. But hey,
listen, I think
the more the better when it comes to this stuff. And listen, I probably understand 30% of it, but the fact that you give so much information means that 30% is more than it ever would have been if you had just said yes.
And you're coming up, you're getting better. I'm getting better at getting to Matt's level, and you're getting better at coming to my level. So progress.
All right. Tomorrow we have a BTL at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. We'll talk to everyone then. See ya.